Hi there, I welcome you to my video about variable costing and absorption costing. We need to distinguish between variable costing and absorption costing, and then how do we prepare costing statements using these two costing systems. Now, when you talk about variable costing, this is the same as marginal costing. Now, variable costing distinguishes between fixed costs and variable costs. The marginal cost of a product is its variable costs, i.e., this includes the direct labor, the direct materials, the direct expenses, and the variable part of overheads. When we talk about marginal costing, this is an accounting system in which the variable costs are charged to cost units, and the fixed costs of the period are written off in full against the contribution. That is marginal costing. So when we are coming up with the cost of the product, we only consider the marginal cost of production. Absorption costing. Now, absorption costing, all costs are absorbed into production. And thus, when we are preparing the operating statements under absorption costing, there is no distinction between fixed and variable costs. Under absorption costing, we value products at their full cost of production, whereby we consider all the marginal costs incurred to produce the product, and then we have to add the fixed production costs. So under absorption costing, stock is valued at the full cost per unit, whereas under marginal costing, we value stock at the marginal cost per unit. We have a sample question here, which I'm going to use to show you how to prepare cost statements as well as profit statements using variable, which is the same as marginal costing, and then absorption costing. Let us try to go through this scenario and we see. Solo Limited makes and sells a single product. The following data relate to periods 1 to 4. We have the variable cost per unit, which is 30. The variable cost per unit is sharing is 30 pounds, as we can see. Then we also have the selling price per unit, which is 55. Then the fixed costs per period, we have 60,000. Variable cost per unit is 30. The selling price per unit is 55. The fixed cost per period, we have 60,000. Normal activity is 500 units. And production and sales for the 4 periods are as follows. Production and sales for the 4 periods are as follows. We have period 1 up to period 4. We have period 1 up to period 4, as you can see. Remember, the normal activity is 500 units. We have the sales and production. You see, we have different sales units in the different periods, and then we have the different production units for period 1, 2, 3, and 4. In period 1, sales are the same as production. In period 2, production exceeds sales. In period 3, sales exceed production. In period 4, production exceeds the sales. There were no opening stocks at the start of the period. There we are not opening stocks at the start of the period. What are we required to do? The requirements of the question, they are telling us that we should prepare operating statements for each of the periods 1 to 4 based on marginal costing principles. Then part B, prepare operating statements for each of the 4 periods 1 to 4 based on absorption costing. Then part C, we are required to comment briefly on the results obtained in each period and in total by the 2 systems. We are going to see how to come up with an operating statement for each of the 4 periods 1 to 4 based on marginal costing principles. That is our question. In this video, I believe you will learn how to use absorption costing and then marginal costing. So in the first place, we are going to see how we can come up with an operating statement for periods 1 to 4 using the marginal costing principles. So in part A, we want to see how we can use the marginal costing system. How to use the marginal costing system. How to use the marginal costing system. Just to give you a small hint just to give you a small hint. Under marginal costing, products, or you can say stock or inventories. Values. The marginal costs. Inventories are valued at the marginal cost. How would we compute the marginal cost? Let us see how we compute that. The marginal cost per unit. What should be included in the marginal cost per unit? What should be included in the marginal cost per unit? Now, when we are coming up with the marginal cost per unit, we have to look at the direct labor. Direct labor. We have to add the direct materials. We have to add the direct expenses, if any. Then we also have to add the variable production of this. We have to add that. Then we get what we call the marginal cost per unit. Get the marginal cost per unit. That will be our marginal cost per unit. So in this case, of course, you have to write a heading. So we have operating statements. Operating statement. For periods 1 to 4. For periods 1 to, for periods 1, 4. So we have period 1, being that this is my heading, I can underline this. So we have period 1, period 2, as well as period 4. These amounts are in pounds, so I can maintain the same currency. No question. Just to be neat in my presentation, let me try to separate these different periods just for some data presentation of my work. And for it to be easy for you to really appreciate this. Yep, that's my profit statement. And of course, now when you try to look at the information given, I'll take you back briefly to the question. We have been given the variable cost per unit, which is 30. That's nice. This time we are not calculating the variable cost per unit. It has been given as 30 in the question. This has been given as 30. So that is our marginal cost per unit. It's what we are going to use under this method. This is our marginal cost per unit, 30. It has been given to you. What else can we look at? Now you have the selling price per unit, and then you also have the sales units for each period. So we need to get the sales revenue, and you just multiply the sales units times the selling prices. For example, in period 1, it's 500 times 55. Period 2, it is 400 times 55. Period 3, it is 550 times 55. Then period 4, it's 450 times 55. When you do that, you'll come up with the sales for each and every period. Let's see this sales. So period 1, it's 500 times 55. Of course, in period 1, our sales, we have 27,500. You multiply to come up with that. 22,000. Then period 3, we have 32,50. Period 4, we have 24,750. I've told you to get the sales, we are getting our sales units times the selling price. So after getting the sales, of course, we have to less what we call the marginal cost of sales. We less our marginal cost of sales. We less the marginal cost of sales. Under the marginal cost of sales, we start with the opening stock. Opening inventory, and in period 1, there was no opening inventory according to the question. And take you back, and you see that there were no opening stocks at the start of period, at the start of period 1. So in period 1, no opening stock. Of course, what I have to do now is to add the production costs. Add production costs. How do we get production costs? Now, production cost here, we get our variable cost per unit. Since we are using absorption costing, variable cost per unit times our production units. Times our production units. Remember, the variable cost per unit is 30. We get that 30 times the production units for each period. So I'll be getting 30, which is our variable cost per unit, times the production. So in period 1, it is 500 times 30. Period 2, it is 500 times 30. Period 3, 450 times 30. And then period 4, 500 times 30. When you do those computations, you do the multiplication, you come up with your production cost in period 1, that is 15,000. Period 2, 15,000. Then period 3, we have 13,500. Then period 3, it is 15,000. Those are the production costs, and we are valuing our products at their variable cost per unit. So get the units produced times the variable cost per unit, which is 30. Then after that, of course, we have to less the closing inventory. We have to less the closing inventory. How do we get the closing inventory? Let's see how to do that. Closing inventory. Now, closing inventory, simple approach to use of formula. Closing inventory. Now, for closing inventory, we get the opening inventory. You get the opening inventory units. You add, let me put this in brackets, opening inventory units plus production units, then minus the sales units. Then what you get, you multiply by the variable cost per unit. times the variable cost per unit, because under this marginal costing system, we value our inventories at their marginal cost per unit or at the variable cost per unit, which is 30. So we look at the number of units you have produced. We add the units we have to look at the number of units at the start. We add the units you've produced during the period. Then we minus the units you've sold to see exactly the unsold units at the end of the period. Those unsold units, that is your closing inventory, and you value each unit at the variable cost per unit. To take you back briefly to our question, let me show you how we can come up with the opening inventory. Let me just add something here, opening inventory. Opening inventory. In period 1, there was no inventory. Okay. But remember the sales, since we are selling, we have to get the opening inventory plus production, then we minus the sales. So these sales have to be minused. I want to show you how we can get our closing inventory. Okay. Here. Now in period 1, as you can see, there is no opening inventory, meaning that I will just look at what we have produced. I've produced 500 minus the units we have sold 500. So the closing inventory is 0. There is nothing in period 1 because production equals to sales. In period 2, we are producing, there is no opening inventory in period 2 because this opening inventory, of course, will come from period 1, but there is no closing period, there is no closing inventory in period 1 simply because production equals to sales. Now in period 2, I will simply get my production, which is 500, minus the units produced 400, giving us 100 units. That is closing inventory for period 2. Then period 3, this closing inventory of period 2 becomes the opening of period 3. So we put that opening inventory up there in period 3. To mean that in period 3, you have the opening inventory from period 2. That is 100 plus the units produced for 50. So you have 550 units available for sale. Then minus the units sold, that is 550. So closing inventory is 0. There is nothing. Why? Because the units are available for sale. That is 100 plus 450, giving you 550. All those units were sold, so there is no closing inventory. So in period 4, opening inventory, we don't have opening inventory. Because this opening inventory, of course, it should be coming from period 3, but we don't have that. Then in period 4, we have 500 units produced minus the 450. So in period 4, you have closing inventory of 50 units, as you can see. Since I'm using variable costing or marginal costing, I'll value this at 30. I'll value these units at 30. So 50 times 30, that is 1,500. Then 100 times 30, that is 3,000. This is my closing inventory of period 2. This is my closing inventory of period 4. In period 3 and 1, we don't have closing inventory. Let me transfer this to my profit statements or operating statements. And then we see. So closing inventory, period 1, no. Period 2, we have a 3,000 there. Period 4, period 3, no, there is nothing. Then period 5, period 4 we have seen period 4 we have. Period 4 we have 50 units. Those were 50 units. Because we are producing 500 and we are producing 500 and we are selling 50 for 15. So we have 50 units unproduced. 50 times 30. 50 at 30. That is 1,500. Yeah. That is our closing inventory. Okay. We take this, our statement, 1,500. So that's how we get the marginal cost of sales. Opening inventory plus the production, then less the closing inventory. So let us get the marginal cost of sales now. We have opening inventory, which is 0 plus the production cost of 10,000 minus closing inventory of 0. Then of course here you will get 15. Here you will get 15,000. Then okay, this is your marginal cost of sales. If you want to note this. Then period 2, 15,000 minus 3,000. Your marginal cost of sales is 12,000. However, in period 3, since we have the closing inventory of period 2, this closing inventory of period 2 becomes the opening inventory of period 3. So here we put a 3,000. The closing inventory of period 2 becomes our opening inventory of period 3. So meaning that in period 3, your marginal cost of sales is 3,000 plus 13,500, giving us 16,500. Closing opening inventory in period 4, no opening inventory, simply because in period 3 there was no closing inventory. Then the marginal cost of sales, that would be 13,500, because 10,000 minus 1,500, we get 13,500. So those are the marginal cost of sales. Now, in management accounting, under marginal costing, we use the concept of contribution, where contribution equals to the sales minus the marginal costs. So in this case, we can get what we call the contribution. Contribution equals to the sales minus the marginal cost of sales in this case. So we get 27,500 minus 15,000. That gives us 12,500. Try to add, try to subtract and see that I have 12,500. Period 2, 22,000 minus 12,000. This is 10,000. Then period 3, 30,250 minus 16,500. This gives you how much? This gives you 13,750. Then period 4, 24,750 minus 13,500. This gives you how much? 11,250. 11,250. That is your contribution. So what you have to list now are the fixed production overheads. We have to list the fixed production overheads. Let me take you back to the question. Remember, under marginal costing, the fixed production overheads are not included in the inventory costs. These costs are written off in full against our contribution. So the fixed production overheads are deducted from the contribution to come up with your net profit. But now, how much are the fixed production overheads? Let's try to find out how much are the fixed production overheads in this case. Fixed production overheads. The fixed cost per period. The fixed cost per period, we have 6,000. And remember, we have period 1 to period 4. So these fixed costs, we have 6,000 for each period. We bring that 6,000. So contribution minus the fixed costs. In fact, let us use fixed costs. We don't know whether it's production or they are non-production overheads, but we have been told that the fixed costs being told that the fixed costs per period. Let us use fixed costs. We have 6,000. Now, contribution minus the fixed costs, you get what we call net profit. So let's get our net profit figures for each period. So net profit. Net profit. Now, net profit, that is contribution minus the fixed costs. So 12,500 minus 6,000, this gives us 6,500. This is 4,000. This is 7,000. 750. And then this is 1150 minus 6,000. This is 5,000. So that is your net profit under marginal costing, or under what we call variable costing. So that is your profit statement under this costing system. So in case you have questions, please feel free. Feel free. You can subscribe to my YouTube channel, and then you put comments there. Don't forget to like, and then don't forget to share with friends. That is if you believe that my content, of course, will benefit them. I remain Senior Hannington. In our next presentation, or in our next video, I'll show you how we can use absorption costing using the same information.